Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be doing a deep dive today on a piece from the Sales Experts. It's called What My First Sales Job Taught Me About Life. And, it might sound kind of simple on the surface, but I think there are some really powerful takeaways here for anyone in a leadership position.
Yeah.
Or really anyone who's working with other people.
It really is amazing how these foundational experiences, especially early in our careers, can really end up shaping, entire approach to business.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things I love about this article is that it kind of reminds us that, sales success, it's not just about techniques or scripts. It's really about mindset and some of these sort of timeless principles that really apply no matter what you're selling.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is the author's argument that these very same principles that lead to success in sales, they can also be applied to leadership as a whole.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So the author starts off by talking about rejection, which is something I think every salesperson has to deal with. And frankly, every leader has to deal with as well. And they talk about how at first, those early no's felt very personal.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that visceral reaction to rejection is something so many of us can relate to, especially, in the sales world where the stakes can feel so high.
Right. But here's where it gets interesting. So the author's manager at the time gave them this little piece of advice that really changed everything for them. They said, rejection isn't personal. It's part of the process. And I just love that. It's such an aha moment. Because how often, do we as leaders let that fear of no hold us back from pursuing, bold initiatives or making tough decisions?
It's a really powerful reframing, isn't it? It's like instead of seeing no as a failure, you see it as redirection, a step closer to maybe the right opportunity. Or, in a leader's case, the right strategy.
I think that's such a great takeaway for our listeners, too. Think about a recent time when you faced a setback, whether it was a deal falling through or a project hitting a snag. How might shifting your perspective on that no have impacted your next steps?
That's a really good question to kind of sit with for a minute. And, speaking of shifting perspectives, another real gem from this article is the emphasis on listening, which is something the author, admits they initially struggled with.
Yeah, it's funny how, especially in leadership roles, we can sometimes feel this pressure to have all the answers, to be the ones doing most of the talking.
Right. And yet the author's manager, very wisely points out that if you're talking more than the customer, you're doing it wrong.
I love that.
It's a golden rule for sales, for sure. But I think it applies to leadership just as well.
100%. Active listening is so important.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding, the needs and the motivations of your team, your clients, your stakeholders.
Right. It's about creating a space where people feel heard and understood. And I think that's ultimately what builds trust and stronger relationships.
This reminds me of a situation I had a while back where, I thought I was being decisive. I was pushing forward with a project, but I hadn't really taken the time to truly listen to my team, to hear their concerns about the project. And what ended up happening was we hit roadblock after roadblock. And it was only when I finally stepped back and really listened that I realized I'd missed some really crucial information and perspectives.
It happens. It's a good reminder, though, that sometimes, as leaders, our most powerful tool isn't our voice, but our ears. It's a powerful story. I think a lot of people listening can relate to that experience.
Yeah, it was a tough lesson for sure. Yeah. But, a valuable one, I think. And it kind of leads perfectly into the next point that this article tackles, which is the power of confidence.
Now, this is an interesting one because, the author admits to feeling anything but confident when they were starting out. But they observed this really fascinating thing about their colleagues who were really successful.
Right. They just seemed to have this aura of confidence, even if they were totally new to the game.
Yeah.
It's that whole fake it till you make it idea, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the article, I think it goes a little deeper than that. It's not just about, putting on a show. The author actually argues that projecting confidence, even if you don't totally feel it at first, can actually become this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy.
So by acting confident,
you
eventually start to believe in yourself.
How?
And then that belief translates into actual competence.
Exactly. And I think for leaders especially, this is so crucial. Think about it. Have you ever had a leader who just lacked confidence? I mean, how did that impact the team's morale, their performance?
So totally. When a leader seems unsure of themselves, it just creates all this uncertainty and anxiety within the team. It's like everyone's just waiting for somebody to take charge. But then on the flip side, when you have a leader who exudes confidence, Even when things are tough, it just inspires everyone else to rise to the occasion.
Absolutely. It sets the tone, and it allows the team to, focus their energy on the task at hand rather than, you know, second-guessing the direction or the leader's ability.
I wonder, though, is there a line between, projecting confidence and coming across as arrogant or out of touch? How can leaders strike that balance?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think the key there is authenticity. It's about, believing in yourself and in your vision, but also being open to feedback, being willing to learn from your mistakes. Confidence without humility, it can very quickly turn into arrogance.
And I imagine that kind of ties back to the importance of listening that we were talking about earlier. A truly confident leader is secure enough to listen to dissenting voices, to acknowledge what they don't know, and to adapt their approach as needed.
You nailed it. It's about being comfortable with that vulnerability, which can actually counterintuitively strengthen your leadership.
That's a really good point. And this article also emphasizes another quality that goes hand in hand with both listening and confidence, and that's persistence. The author jokes that if I had $1 for every time I was told, follow up, I could have retired after my first year in sales.
It makes you chuckle. But it's so true. Persistence is often the key differentiator, between those who succeed in sales and those who don't.
And I'd imagine it's equally important in leadership, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about, the major initiatives that you've led or the challenging goals you've set for your team. How often did those successes hinge on persistence, on pushing through roadblocks, on staying focused, even when progress was slow?
I mean, all the time. It's easy to get discouraged,
Yeah.
when you face setbacks or delays.
Yeah.
But I think true leaders find a way to keep moving forward, to motivate their teams, and to maintain that long-term vision.
Yeah, it's about that grit, that resilience, that ability to weather the storms and come out stronger on the other side.
I love that. The author of this article really nails it when they say that, persistence, it's not just about closing deals. It's about a fundamental approach to life.
100%. And I think that's such a powerful takeaway for our listeners, whether you're leading a team, launching a new product, or simply striving to achieve a personal goal. That unwavering commitment to persistence is often the deciding factor in success.
It's inspiring to be reminded of these simple but powerful truths. It's funny how we talk about persistence so much in terms of, overcoming challenges, but I think it's equally important in those moments when things are going well.
Oh, how so?
Well, it's easy to get complacent when you're on a winning streak, to think you've got it all figured out. But true persistence to me means constantly striving to improve, to learn to evolve, even when you're at the top of your game.
I like that. It's like maintaining that hunger, that drive to keep pushing the boundaries no matter how successful you are right now.
Exactly. And that kind of brings me to what I think is the most profound takeaway from this whole article, which is the idea that sales, at its core, is really about building genuine human connections. The author tells this story about landing their first big client, and it wasn't because of some fancy presentation or some aggressive closing technique. It was because they took the time to really get to know the client at a personal level.
That really resonates with me. It's a good reminder that people don't buy from, faceless corporations or slick sales pitches. They buy from people they trust, people they connect with.
100%. And that trust, as we've been talking about, is built on those foundational principles.
I love listening.
Authenticity. And a genuine desire to understand the needs of others.
Yeah, it's about seeing the human being behind the sale, the individual, with their unique motivations and aspirations.
Totally. This reminds me of a time early in my career when I was so focused on hitting my numbers that I totally lost sight of that human element. I was treating sales as this purely transactional process. And my results, honestly, they reflected that. It wasn't until I shifted my mindset and started genuinely caring about my clients and focusing on building those relationships that my sales really took off.
It's a classic tale. It really speaks to that timeless truth that people buy from people they like and people they respect.
And that liking and respect is earned, not through manipulative tactics or pressure, but through genuine connection and a commitment to delivering value.
Well said. You've brought up so many great points today. It's clear that these principles from the Sales Experts, they really extend far beyond just sales. They offer a roadmap, I think, for effective leadership, for building strong teams, and really for navigating the complexities of human interaction in any setting.
I couldn't agree more. And I hope our listeners walk away from this deep dive feeling inspired to apply these lessons in their own lives.
Absolutely. Whether you're leading a team, negotiating a deal, or just, Trying to connect with someone on a deeper level, these core principles, listening, authenticity, persistence, building genuine relationships, they will serve you well.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. Think about one area of your leadership or your sales approach where you could benefit from applying one of these principles more intentionally. What's one small step you can take this week to strengthen those connections, to build that trust, and ultimately to create more meaningful and successful interactions?
It's a great question to consider. And remember, even small changes consistently applied can lead to really remarkable results.
This has been a really insightful conversation. A big thank you to the sales experts for sharing their wisdom and to our listeners for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building those authentic connections that make all the difference.